Welcome into this segment of Behind the Pen presented by MostValuablePodcast.com. If you want to listen to the full podcast, go to blogtalkradio.com/MostValuablePodcast. Also, we're on iTunes, so check us out there as well. Thank you all for listening as always, and enjoy the show.
This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
Welcome in, my friends, to another episode of Behind the Pen. My name is Mike Rankin, and I will be your host for today's show. And this episode, I am actually by myself. However, I mention that because I recorded two full-length podcasts for you right here on Behind the Pen because I love you so much. That's how I care. That's how much I care. Well, mainly it's because of baseball season. Baseball starts on Sunday, guys, and I can't wait to share my thoughts and opinions with you. For this episode, I am going to preview the 2017 Major League Baseball season. Now, I'm going to do this in kind of a unconventional way. I'm going to break it down not by division. I am going to break it down by contenders, by teams who are going to be maybe middle of the pack, right? And then teams who suck. I'm sorry for the fans whose teams suck, but that's just the way it is because my team, the Chicago Cubs, have sucked for years, and I know how that is. And I mentioned the Cubs because, one, they're obviously defending World Series champions, no big deal, but mainly, I wanted to mention them because I had a awesome guest on in the prior full-length podcast that I recorded today, and Brittany Dole was kind enough to come on and join us. She shared so many awesome, insightful experiences she's had within the Chicago Cubs organization. She shared memories. She was actually at Game 7 of the World Series in Cleveland as a Cubs fan. So you have to check that out right here on Behind the Pen. Most Valuable Podcast is the place to be. Today, strictly baseball. Celebrated that with Brittany Dole. We reminisced about the Cubs, previewed the 2017 season again. I'm going to probably get into the Cubs side of things here in this podcast as well, but I have to give a shout out one more time to Brittany Dole. Check that out right here on Most Valuable Podcast. It's a great listen, but I'm a little biased. And anything I do is fantastic, so you're just going to have to take my word for it. And today, it's going to be a fantastic show. Major League Baseball talk, what's better, right? Warm weather, bats cracking, gloves popping, hot dogs being eaten, beers being drinking. Well, that's not past tense, but you know what I'm trying to say, or present tense, whatever. I'm all out of sorts. It doesn't matter because baseball's back. It's like the companion, right? It's the companion that I have with me for 7 months out of the year who's always there. So the grind starts again on Sunday. I cannot wait. I'm so very much looking forward to this MLB season because all of these young players, I think baseball is starting to trend upwards in terms of, I guess, viewership or interest, level of interest. Maybe I'm just saying that because the Cubs are really good and I'm into baseball more so than as if they're bad. Obviously, if they're bad, it's not as enjoyable because your team's not winning. But I think overall you have this new influx of talent, of young talent. Alex Bregman, Trey Turner, unbelievable. Bryce Harper coming off a terrible season, but I expect him, I expect him to come back with authority. Corey Seager, Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, Albert Almora, and I'm just mentioning three guys from the Chicago Cubs. I mean, they litter Nolan Arenado, Trevor Story. I mean, guys, Major League Baseball, Carlos Correa, I can continue. This is going to be fun. And I am so excited. I think I am probably the most hyped that I've ever been, maybe even more so than last year because I just have so much to look forward to. So I'm going to get into it. Like I said, I'm going to do this kind of unconventionally, talk about contenders first, and I'm going to break it down between each league. So I'll start with the NL, AL, we'll go from there. Also, I just want to mention that I am going to name my Cy Young votes for the NL and AL. Also, I'm going to name an MVP. And I'll probably talk about the Rookie of the Year as well. So stay tuned for all of it. I am here for you. And before I really dive into things, I know I'm a little late into this intro. It's okay. Bear with me. Here at Most Valuable Podcast, we dedicate a lot of time to doing these podcasts. And I apologize if, I'm not producing a show on a weekly basis. A lot of us here have jobs, or everybody here has something else going on in their lives. I wish we could do this every day, but the goal is to try and do that, and we need your help. We need your help. If you can go on patreon.com/Most Valuable Podcast and donate whatever your income, whatever you have. I mean, we greatly appreciate it. We have lapel mics now. We are trying to branch out. We're trying to get creative with our product. So any way you can help, we really, really, really do appreciate you. Continue to watch, like, subscribe, comment, all of that, share. It's great. We do this for you guys, and we really do appreciate you checking in, give us the feedback. We love it. Absolutely love it. So thank you so much. And for me, as a host of Behind the Pen, my own show, it's just an honor seeing all of these people reaching out and giving me feedback. So I love it. So continue to do so. And I just had to throw that in there, patreon.com/most valuable podcast. So we are talking Major League Baseball today. My favorite sport, no Chicago Bears talk, guys. I can't do it. Mike Glennon, Mark Sanchez can't do it. Okay. We're talking baseball. I'll probably jump on that train when I have to, but not right now because there are more pressing needs, like in the NL playoff race. Yes, March 30th, we are talking playoffs. And I guess in baseball, compared to other sports, you can already kind of assume who's going to be competitive because unlike other sports, you can base their performances on metrics and you can actually calculate a rough estimate or an educated guess on how a team will do, on how players do. So it's a very unique aspect in that sense. And that's maybe why I get so involved in it. I can get lost into stats all day, and I know people can relate to that. So here we go. And we can go back to prior seasons, of course. But when you break down the teams in the National League who are contenders, it goes like this in order, in my opinion. Chicago Cubs, Los Angeles Dodgers, Washington Nationals, New York Mets, San Francisco Giants, St. Louis Cardinals. Now, those are the for sures. For sure. Now, if you saw it, you have 6 playoff teams, right? And there are only 5 spots. Cubs in the Central, Dodgers in the West, Nationals in the East, and then you have 3 teams fighting for the wild card spots. Now, it may not end up that way. The Dodgers may lose to the Mets. The Mets look very dangerous, mainly because their starting rotation throughout the spring to this point looks healthy. And maybe I should start with the Mets. So let's do that with the Mets right now. They're an interesting team, and I am kind of skeptical on the New York Mets. I think they're legit for sure, but it really hinders on the health of their rotation. They got really good news on Zach Wheeler. Zach Wheeler apparently is going to make the rotation and be a part of the starting 5 starting on opening day. Huge. I mean, he missed all of last season with rehabbing from Tommy John. It was a long rehab for Zach Wheeler, and he was one of the top pitching prospects coming up. I remember in 2015, he was absolutely dangerous. I believe, was that the year he got hurt? Or 2014, whenever it was. I believe it was 15. But, prior to his injury, he was so good. So good. Top of the rotation type stuff. And, I mean, he was among the guys that the Mets may have kind of shopped around a bit. They ended up keeping him, obviously. But you look at that rotation, Syndergaard, DeGrom, Harvey, Wheeler. Really? Steven Matz is hurt, but the Mets are able to plug in a guy like Robert Gisselman, who stepped in last year and did well in 44 innings pitched for the Mets. I mean, you feel good about this rotation. You look at the Mets, and I said this when I was talking to Brittany, which you should check that out, the podcast with Miss Brittany Dole. It was fantastic. I talked about it. If you're looking at contenders, you have to start with the rotation and the starting pitching, because without it, you're not going to compete for a World Series. It's just flat out, you need to have pitching to be able to win. I mean, even back into the bullpen, you saw it last year with the Cubs and then Cleveland. Their rotations really carried them throughout the postseason and throughout the regular season. So in terms of the Mets, I mean, they got it. They got it cooking. So I guess the next question is, how is their lineup going to produce for them? And I guess we can talk about the bullpen in a minute. I don't want to spend too much time on each team because this is going to be an overall generalization of the competitors here in the National League. But the Mets are interesting. They stick out to me because I think they're good enough to compete, right? But that lineup isn't dangerous enough, in my opinion, to get them to the promised land. They're going to have to rely solely on pitching, maybe win games where they have to score 3 runs. If they score 3 or 4 runs, I think 4 runs or more, you're in. You got that game, especially with that rotation. Addison Reed, bad. He's not very good. But Yoris Familia, are you serious, dude? Getting suspended to start the season? If I'm a Mets fan, I'm pissed. So, I mean, that's what you got there in the bullpen for the most part. I'm not going to talk about bullpen arms too much in the show, but you look at the lineup. David Wright, his back. What's going on with David Wright? But Jose Reyes is back. Jose Reyes was, I think, the right signing for the Mets. He had a lot of baggage coming in, but for him to sign in New York and come back, I think they accepted him much more so than maybe another organization would have. So I think that's a nice fit there. Asdrubal Cabrera is coming off a career season. Neil Walker's a very solid player, above value there at second base. Lucas Duda, I think you're okay with Lucas Duda. He's one of the more productive bats. Michael Conforto, young outfielder who made the 25-man roster. And of course, you're able to re-sign Cespedes, who opted out and then gets a new deal. So I think for the most part, Jay Bruce as well, he's coming back. I think for the most part, the Mets are good enough to compete, especially they're going to be carried by that starting rotation, but they're in the mix for sure. But I don't think they're good enough to beat the Washington Nationals, because the Nationals made a splash for Adam Eaton. You're okay with giving up Lucas Giolito and acquiring Adam Eaton in the deal, but the problem with the Eaton move is that you'll see it, Nats fans, he's not that great in center field. He's kind of a clumsy center fielder. He's more valuable in right field, one of the most valuable right fielders in the game for a while there in Chicago before, the stuff happened there with playing time and whatnot. But looks like he's going to start in center this season, but he's a very productive player. Don't get me wrong. I like Adam Eaton. He's just kind of a crazy person in his own mind. But I like the Nationals as a whole much more than I do the Mets. I think they have a very healthy balance of power. I think they have speed, and I think Bryce Harper is going to come back and kill it this season. Plus, you add in Trey Turner, who's most likely your opening day shortstop. I think that was already confirmed. If not, I'm an idiot. But Trey Turner's another young prospect who is just electric. He can do so much for you. He can steal it back. He can hit for power. Not saying he's going to put up like 30 homers a season, but the guy's got power potential to knock it out of the park. Anthony Rendon's a solid piece. Daniel Murphy arguably could have been the National League most valuable player last season with the performance he had at the plate. Maybe a below average value player there defensively, but still, you make up for it there in the lineup and on the field. Their rotation, it's solid. I like it because there are three guys who you can absolutely count on, in my opinion, at least from what I saw. I think Joe Ross is legit. I think I like Tanner Roark a lot. And of course, Max Scherzer. Max Scherzer, reigning Cy Young winner. The guy's killing it. When you look at the Nationals, however, I think there are some questions you have to be skeptical about Steven Strasburg coming back from his injury. He gets hurt, comes back, first start, he's hurt again. And he's been dealing with injury concerns all season long, all career long, signed a long-term contract. The Nationals invested so much money in him. Top talent, just can't stay healthy. And it's very concerning when you're an organization investing money in pitching, because it's a lot of it. They're not playing every day. What do they get? 35, 40 starts a year. So it's not like they're playing 160 like a position player. And they maybe suffer the most kind of punishment in terms of wear and tear on their body. Arm injuries, it's hard. It's very hard to determine really the value in a pitcher based on their ability to stay healthy, because you never know when an arm injury is going to occur. So, there's questions about Strasburg's health. Looks like he's healthy coming out of camp, so that's a good sign. Gio Gonzalez, he hasn't been really what the Nationals kind of hoped for moving as his career is moving forward, if that makes any sense. I think Gio Gonzalez is starting to regress. But like I said, Tanner Roark and Joe Ross, they're legit. They'll pick it up. Max Scherzer, great signing, great pitcher, one of the best in baseball. I would argue top three. I love watching Max Scherzer pitch live. It's a treat and a half. So Nationals are really good. Lineup, they don't have a solidified closer yet. Sean Kelly and Blake Trinan, I think they're trying to plot out there, right? Try it out there. That's not going to get it done. You're going to have to commit to somebody, whether it's trading for David Robertson or finding someone. I don't know. That's just me, because you're going to have to win. They lost Melanson, so, what are you going to do if you're the Nationals late back end of the bullpen there? Jason Worthless? Guys, you done with Jason Worth? Hopefully he comes up and shows the Nationals something. So I mentioned the Nationals. I think they're the third best team this year in baseball. And looking up at them, or looking up at a team ahead of them, is the Los Angeles Dodgers. And a lot has been going down with the Dodgers going into this season, because, they're a team that doesn't have really any flaws. I think they're very good. Can they beat the Cubs? That's the question, because the Cubs are the target, and I think they're the most complete and talented and yada, yada, yada. I could talk about the Cubs all day, but we're talking Dodgers, and they're looking at the Cubs and losing in the NLCS last year. He relied on Kershaw 3 different times. I think the rotation may be the hole that the Dodgers are going to have to address maybe come deadline. We'll see. Kenta Maeda is good. Very good. Rich Hill just signed that extension. Good for Rich Hill. I love stories like Rich Hill, and he's a quality pitcher. One of the best pitchers in the game quietly. I mean, the guy can manipulate the strike zone with his off-speed pitches, one of the best curveballs in the game, obviously, and he can locate. As a lefty, it's very valuable. So Kershaw, Maeda, Hill, that's good. But then you got Hyun-Jin Ryu coming in back into the rotation. We haven't seen him in a while, right? So curious to keep an eye on Ryu all season long. Brendan McCarthy dealing with injuries, right? Scott Kazmir getting older. He's hurt. Alex Wood possibly in the mix as well. So, I mean, you have all these pieces. Like I said, they're good pieces, but is it enough to take them over the edge here or over the top of the Cubs? So it'll be interesting to see. I love the depth that the Los Angeles Dodgers have in their lineup. Their 25-man roster is loaded with depth. You have Kenley Jansen, by the way, re-signing in Los Angeles, which is great. One of the best closers, if not the best closer in the game today. Moving forward, though, in the field, what's going to happen with Yasiel Puig? He's really never ceases to amaze me, right? As a entertainer on the field there. I'm just glad that my organization doesn't have to deal with him. That's your problem, Dodger fans. But you look at Puig, he's obviously talented. Let's see how much of a role he maintains there in right field with the Dodgers. But Jock Peterson, legit. Corey Seager, one of the best players, Rookie of the Year, most likely going to be in MVP conversations for years to come. Logan Forsythe, now that's a savvy signing. That's a guy who's going to plug and play, and he's going to do things for you that the Dodgers kind of lacked last year. I mean, more contact is nice. I think making up for a lot of the strikeouts, specifically Jock Peterson struggled with. That's just one example. You're getting another season out of Adrian Gonzalez. I think he was really good in the postseason last year. He's been there before. So this is a very quality club. Justin Turner, have to mention him as well. That's a guy who is worth every penny and what he brings there at the plate specifically. So I like the Dodgers a lot. That's why I ranked them as the second best team in the National League this year. I didn't really do, maybe I should have, overall MLB rankings, but in the NL specifically, Dodgers 2, Cubs 1. I'll probably get to the Cubs last because I got to stay in the NL West here and talk about the San Francisco Giants a little bit. Last year, they scared the hell out of me. Even going into the season last year, before the season, I really did have a feeling, guys. I mean, my first show that I've ever recorded here on Behind the Pen, I said the Cubs were going to win the World Series. And I believe in that show, I mentioned, the only team that really scares me in the NL, really in baseball maybe? I don't know. But specifically the Giants, because they were dangerous in terms of their starting rotation, the way they matched up against other teams. You're not going to beat Mad Bum, guys. And that's what the NL wild card, that's why it's so important for a team to win their division. You're going to have to try out your ace in a wild card game to ensure yourself in the NLDS, and then you can't start him until what, game 3? Is that what it was when the Cubs played the Dodgers in the first round? Yeah, game 3, Mad Bum. Cubs almost won that game, came back, scored 3 runs in the 9th to tie it, ended up losing extra innings, but we all know how that ended. That series and that playoff run. So, woo, Cubs, yeah. So, but the Giants, you're looking at Mad Bum, one of the best pitchers in the game, probably the best, or arguably the best postseason pitcher all time. Am I going out on a limb there? But I mean, I'm just giving him the credit that he deserves. He's just been phenomenal. Johnny Cueto, legit. If the Cubs had to play Johnny Cueto again in game 5, they probably would have been walking home. I'd probably be crying on this podcast. I'd probably be crying for years because the Giants were that good. And Johnny Cueto is that good. Matt Moore, great signing. Great guy to acquire because of his ability to manipulate, sort of like a Rich Hill guy, manipulate the strike zone, off-speed pitches, location. That's a good piece to have. Samardzija, question mark. Matt Cain, question mark. Is Matt Cain going to make it back into this rotation? Love it. Love stories like him. Mentioned about Rich Hill, but Matt Cain, he was a big-time player in the Giants' early postseason runs back in 2010. I mean, quality arm, just dealing with some setbacks in terms of arm problems. So you look at it overall, I think the 1 through 3, yes, that is good enough to take you to a World Series. Samardzija, inconsistent, a guy who you will eat up innings for you, will get you through the regular season, but you don't like having on the mound in a big game. Whether it's a big regular season game, must win, or in the playoffs. So, I mean, that's just outside opinion looking in. I've seen him in Chicago, Samardzija, just meh. But quality for the regular season. You look at the outside of the rotation. I mentioned Melanson. He's now their closer there in San Francisco. We know that the Giants struggled mightily, probably were the worst or second worst bullpen in baseball last season next to the Cincinnati Reds, so that's a problem. Hopefully shored it up a little bit with Mark Melancon. Hunter Strickland throws really hard, so woo. But I like this lineup a lot. I think they're dangerous. Hunter Pence, Eduardo Nunez was a savvy trade that they acquired from the Twins at the deadline last year. Brandon Crawford coming off that World Baseball. By the way, United States won the World Baseball Classic, guys. Shout out, international competition in baseball. Woo, United States. But Brandon Crawford, very quality player, one of my favorite players in the game today as a shortstop. So Brandon Belt, consistent. Buster Posey, you know it. They're going to be there. Joe Panic, they're going to be there. The Dodgers, the Nationals, the Mets, and the Giants, as they are all looking up at the Chicago Cubs. Now let's look at the NL Central, and I'm sorry for having the NL side of things a little longer in this podcast than maybe later segments in the show, probably because the intro is a little long, but bear with me, guys. I apologize for that, but baseball, it's back. I am so pumped, and we're looking at the St. Louis Cardinals, okay? So the Cardinals, looking up the Cubs for sure. However, I think they're competitive enough to make a run at the playoffs, and do I want to go out on a limb and say they're going to make the playoffs this year? I might. I absolutely might, because you look at this rotation, starting with Carlos Martinez, ace, material, for sure. Adam Wainwright, how's he doing, guys, in St. Louis? What do you feel about him? He's aging, still quality pitcher. Michael Wacha, bleh. Lance Lynn, possibly Mike Leake, bleh, bad. I'm not a fan of Mike Leake. That's just me. That's just my opinion, but not my problem. So you have two quality starters there, potentially three, in Martinez, Wainwright, and if Wacha gets off whatever he's doing there, he's just got to perform. He just hasn't been performing. It's interesting what the Cardinals are doing with their lineup, and Randall Grichuk, Dexter Fowler, Stephen Piscotty. You like it there in the outfield. The acquired Dexter Fowler there this offseason, signed a long-term deal, got paid. Good for him. He's a very quality player, switch hitter, top of the lineup, sets things up very nicely, gets on base at a very valuable clip. So that's a great deal. Piscotty's a superstar. Love Steven Piscotty. Gives you balance across the board. He'll hit for average, and he'll post a high OPS, and he'll drive in runs. So Steven Piscotty, one of the most quality hitters in the game, and quietly turning into a star consistently. Okay, now there's a fundamental problem within the St. Louis Cardinals, by the way, and that's Mike Matheny. He just sucks, guys. He's an idiot. He's a bad manager. So I'm interested to see how he stays patient with guys specifically up the middle. Are they going to commit to Aledmys Diaz? I think Aledmys Diaz has to force Matheny to commit to him, because I think Diaz is the real deal, and I think he's very good. He's just, Matheny is quick to pull the trigger on the young players for whatever reason. So hopefully we see something change in terms of the managerial style. I doubt it. You talk about bad managers, two of them are in the same state, and that's Ned Yost in Kansas City, World Series champion. Don't know how. Well, I do know how. The Royals bailed him out. And Mike Matheny in St. Louis. So we'll keep an eye on that. But Colton Wong, Aledmys Diaz up the middle. You like that. Matt Carpenter slated to play first base, right? I talked about the Cardinals earlier in the show, in an earlier podcast. If you want to check that out, it's still on YouTube. Matt Adams, they have behind them. So, they have depth there. Joel Peralta at third. So it really relies, I think, with the Cardinals, how they're going to balance that starting rotation, how they're going to manage it throughout the season. They still have some quality prospects, not as much. I think they have, 3 in the top 50 still? I may be wrong on that. I know there's a pitcher in there somewhere. So the Cardinals are going to be a threat. Are they going to make the playoffs this year? They'll probably be competing with the Mets and Giants. So that'll be fun. Now, ending this contender conversation here in the National League is going to be the Chicago Cubs. Sorry, guys, I'm going to keep this brief. Defending World Series champions, they're doing a lot with their rotation. Well, not so much. They have 4 guys returning in Lester, Arrieta, Lackey, and Hendricks. They signed Brett Anderson, who won the fifth starter's role. He's actually slated to pitch 4th. Hendricks in the 5th spot. No big deal. It's just based on matchups. That moves Mike Montgomery to the bullpen. I like the Cubs bullpen a lot. I think it's balanced. Signed Wade Davis. Still got Hector Rondon. Dealt with struggles last season, but I think maybe without being hurt and you have a full offseason to recover, he can be valuable. And like I said, they're returning pretty much everyone in the field. The biggest change is in center where Albert Almora and John Jay will likely take over the everyday duties there for Dexter Fowler, who departed. Kyle Schwarber is going to be healthy again, which is crazy to think about. And then you have Javi Baez, who doesn't even have a position, but could be the most efficient defensive player in the game today in terms of quality, right? So Cubs are in a good spot, and I have them going back to the World Series, but losing to Cleveland. So it's going to be a rematch of last year, and Cleveland takes it. Thank you guys for sticking around for this segment of Behind the Pen. If you want more Most Valuable Podcast content, click on the video up above, because I don't know why you wouldn't want to keep listening to our voices every day. But again, guys, thank you all for listening. We really do appreciate you.